Welcome to this discussion on dynamics of industrialization in India. This discussion relates to our MA program in Sociology, specific to our course MSO 004, Sociology in India. In this discussion, first we will try to talk about the process of initiation of industrialization across the globe, its arrival in India, and sociological understanding the process of industrialization in India. Let us start with what do you understand by industrialization. Sociologically speaking, we can talk about industrialization, a process of improvisation of human capacity of production of goods and services with the use of technology. So what we are talking about here, a kind of progression of human society from nature to culture. When we talk about the progression from nature to culture, we talk about a process of sophistication in terms of uses of art, culture, even of technology. Here our emphasis is on technology. When we talk about industrialization, the technological part comes into the forefront. Human civilization, as we have already discussed and we talk about, it started with the discovery of the wheel. Wheel is a technology. It is based on, with the movement of the wheel, the progression of the human society started coming in. But when it was from a hand-made wheel, it started, when the machine started coming in, it started giving a different kind of a shape, and it totally revolutionized the whole process of production in human society. Coming back to the understanding the process of industrialization, we refer to the change in the technology used to produce the goods and services. This is the basic economic process. Also, it is the prime mover and the prime catalyst for change in the polity, polity and society of the humanity in this earth. So, when we are talking about industrialization, a process of quantum jump in the usage of technology, in the revolution of invention in technology, and also in the revolution in the production process, in the distribution process, and ultimately is ramification for the culture, polity, and society. So, industrialization start with what we call about the industrial and scientific revolution. The industrial and scientific revolution that started taking place in the Western society, especially in the Western Europe, starting from the late 18th or the middle 18th century, it brought a big revolution in human action. Action for the production, action for the distribution, action for the consumption of various commodities. And what happened in the whole process of defining this action, technology started playing a big part. So what kind of technology that promoted this industrial revolution? We should spend a few minutes on that. Starting from the very middle part of 18th century, the Western Europe started seeing varieties of the development. John Kenny, he brought his flying machine in 1733. In 1735, James Hargrave brought his spinning jenny, the spinning machine was a handmade that was revolutionized with the discovery of a spinning machine. Then Samuel Compton in 1779 invented a machine for strong iron Then we find that the steam engine, James Watt brought the steam engine in 1773. In 1762, we find that again steam engine that started supplementing the power. So what happened with the whole process of flying machine, the weaving machine, the urn, and also the steam engine, it brought a new culture because it is the electricity. They started giving more power to the machine, and machine started bringing more and more production, and ultimately it started giving a whole boost to the whole process of production, and production started being not a local phenomenon. It started becoming a wider regional, national, ultimately an international phenomenon. And along with this production process, what we find, the road transport started expanding, and what we find that with that road and transport, communication also started coming in. In the early 19th century, saw the discovery of this telephone, and along with all those, the tools and techniques, the road and transport and communication started coming in, and altogether what we find, a new situation arising all over the world that transform our society from a natural based to a highly sophisticated culture based, technology driven culture based. So at this stage, let us talk about some of the common features, some of the features that brought in the industrialization, that displaced many of the earlier one. One feature is that with this technological intervention, we find there's a large scale production. Earlier is a small scale family based production. We started finding a large scale factory based production. And what happened in the whole process of production, earlier it was the human physical power driven production. Now we find the human physical capacity got misplaced, rather got displaced by machine, and what we find, then the machine operated machine started coming in, power driven machine started coming in, and the electricity, the steam and the gas become the energy, and the human physical power got displaced from the scene, and gradually started coming in the gas, electricity and the steam. And the whole process of change, the large scale production, the machine started coming in, there also started taking place what is a large scale production and the mass production. Earlier, the production was a small scale because it's a small factory and human power. Now the machine power, large factory, the large scale production, and this mass based production, and it's also started looking for mass market. So a kind of a quantum jump in a human society in terms of the production, consumption and distribution. Along with the whole process, what we find enormous intersectionality of the division of labor. Earlier, it was the same person who was involved in all varieties of the activities. Here we find a specialized activity and specialized intervention by the laborer in certain special activities, and gradually those special activities were taken care of by special kind of labor force. So we find a gradual shift in the production process along with the factory machine. A new kind of division of labor came in, and the large scale production and the mass production started taking place. Along with this, we find the whole factors of production people started looking at in a very more scientific way. More factors of production, land, labor, capital and organization, same thing remained, but people started doing it more in a calculative way. That is what kind of, earlier it was the land, a huge amount of land was required for agricultural production. The use of land became quite little because you need a small place to have your factory. So uses of land was minimized. Then came the labor. So what we find earlier, it was the machine power, human power got replaced by machine power. Then capital. Earlier we find that a little capital was required. Now we find a huge kind of capital. Even the tool and techniques also became a capital. The huge organization started coming in. Earlier it was a family production or a small home-based production. Or a localized production. Now we find a huge kind of big companies started coming in. Maybe one of the largest was the East India Company started forming out of that. So some factories were developing so many clothes, some are iron, some are steel. So varieties of the production started coming in. So we find the factors of production also got redefined. Simultaneously, the organization, the entrepreneurs emerged with a different kind of entrepreneurial zeal, and they started looking for the expansion of the market. For the expansion of the market, so what the first did, the monetization and commoditization of the whole process of production and expansion of the market, going beyond the localized area. It started going beyond the regional area, beyond the national area. Ultimately, it paved the way for the emergence of early capitalism and also matured capitalism. Will come at a later stage of our discussion to that. Also, industrialization promoted the whole process of urbanization. The urbanization means it started shifting the whole process of production from agriculture to non-agricultural product, number one. Number two, it increased the density of people's concentration in certain places. So density of the people increased in certain areas. Also simultaneously, it brought in a different kind of paraphernalia of urban living. So different kind of urban amenities, those were required in terms of the road, transport, school, hospitals. So all started coming in. So those become integral part of industrialization. And what happened? Ultimately, it also shifted the site of production. What is the site of production from family? It became the site of production, become the factory. And ultimately, within this factory, what we started finding in, that is a well-defined employer-employee relationship gradually emerged. Those were the owners of the tools and techniques of production. They were the employers, and those who were giving the physical labor, they become the employee. A kind of employer-employee relationship started emerging in along with the whole process. So what we find in the 19th century, gradually with the whole process of industrialization, especially in the Western Europe, the agriculture that was accommodating more than 90% of the labor force, along with industrialization in the late 19th century, 75% of the labor force and population started having an industrialized life. So a kind of a phenomenal shift in the life pattern of the people, along with the emergence of the large factory, the machine, the division of labor, new factors of production, commoditization of the production, urbanization, and increasing employer-employee relationship. What is brought in, that is, there was a change in the in the social pattern. So what happened? The machine changed the traditional production and the manufacturing process, which was earlier the family-based or the guild-based. So machine brought a big change in the social pattern. And many such families moved to the cities, those were in the rural areas, and gradually many migrated to the urban areas. And earlier, as I told, the employer-employee relationship, there also emerged a defined class relationship. There is a bourgeoisie class and the working class that emerged. Also, new class of industrial workers emerged and started working. And many places, the men, women, children, and working in the textile mill, in the pottery, and other mines also, they started working, and they become the organized working class in the industrialized society. The whole process of development of industrialization, the traditional craftsman and the skilled artisan, their important get displaced in the society, and their situation degraded. And many of them, they become the wage earners and daily laborers, and started surviving in the society, remaining insecure in terms of their employment and livelihood. Now at this stage, what is important that the whole process of development thus started taking place in the organization of production, the transition from the rural to the urban, transition from the agrarian to the industrial society. It also helped, it also provoked the sociologists to look into the social phenomenon, how the society started looking into this transition. Many of us, as a student of sociology, we know that that sociology is a product of industrialization, and it started visualizing the industrialization, how human thought, human action, and the social composition started changing in. And Comte, the founding father of sociology, he talked about the social statics and the social dynamics and the development and change. What he told that there is an enormous process of change has been engineered with the whole process of industrialization, and society gradually shifted from one stage to another. And his idea was that society gradually shifted from its theological state to the metaphysical stage to a scientific stage. And in the stage, the earlier military society and the theological type is totally now getting replaced by industrial type and a positive type. What is the positive type? People started thinking, calculating in a very rational way. So there was the emergence of a positivistic society, and that is a scientific society, an industrialist society, a kind of founded on the progression of human mind from theological, metaphysical to positivistic. So what if Comte is saying a kind of a transition of the society from pre-positive to a positive stage. So Morgan also widely talked about a kind of a society that emerged from savagery, barbarism to civilization, and that is human supremacy on the earth was quite established with the whole process of industrialization. Marx also widely talked about the whole process of transition of the society, and this transition was widely engineered and smoothened with the whole process of industrialization. That is the transition from Asiatic ancient feudalism to capitalism, and ultimately the class struggle, change and development. He looked into the whole process of development with capitalism was growing, and capitalism has grown with the whole process of expansion of industrial economy. So his thesis of social change and transformation was founded on the process of an industrial society, the emergence of industrialism in the Western Europe. Herbert Spencer, he also widely talked about in his famous The Origin of the Species, and he talked about how society transited from the simple, that is from the family to the clan, to a doubly compound society, from clan to a tribal society, then triply compound society, that is from a tribe to a state society. Then what he talked about, a military to industrial society. From military to industrial society, he talked about it is widely industrial society engineered by the process of industrialization, and he also looked into, underlined the emergence of a laissez-faire, a pre-trade society with the expansion of industrialization on this earth. Similarly, Tonis also widely talked about that how it has influenced that Jimny shaft to Gishel shaft, that how the natural conditioning of the family, that is marriage, kinship, all this institution was conditioned by the production process, efficiency, self-interest and individualism. It is one of the product of the arrival of the industrialization and the industrial society on the earth. Durkheim, in his famous work, he's talked about two types of solidarity. That is his mechanical to organic solidarity. What it talks about the whole transition, it is also the division of labor, widely guided by the emergence of the industrial society, where this transition from a moral belief and ideals, the collective conscience, actually it is gradually shifted towards a mechanical solidarity with moral and mental density, and within that specialization of the job, the division of labor become quite important. Similarly, Max Weber widely talked about the gradual transition of the society with industrialization. The transition took place in terms of from traditional to a rational society. In terms of when the industrialization came, gradually with that, he found that with the arrival of the industrialization, money, banking, bureaucracy, and a scientific spirit, a rational society is emerging. So what it looked into, that whole process of industrialization is looked into in terms of a progression of society from mechanical to organic society, from traditional to a rational society, from pre-scientific to scientific society, from pre-industrial to industrial society, from military to an industrial society. So what you find, a kind of a positivistic development has been widely thought of. Now let us come in, that is how the industrialization has come into India and what has been its ramification, how it has been looked into. Before the arrival of the British, Indian society was having its own indigenous variety of the industry, that is self-sufficient village community system of production, within which local industries grows, the household industry and the cottage industry, those grew, and those were sufficing the purpose of the local people, but those were sufficient enough to attract even the global attention. Those were foundation, those were there. British had a very contradictory approach to industrialization in India. Those contradictory approach has widely been documented by Dadabhai Naoroji's, that is his famous Drain of Wealth, and R.C. Dutt's the economic history of India. So there we find that gradually how the Indian resources, Indian handloom, those culture were gradually replaced with the arrival of the British industrial culture. And what the British tried to do British tried to do two contradictory things. One is that British tried to have certain industrial product in India, starting from 1850s, from Bombay, Calcutta, Madras. They started to have some industries, especially the cotton industries, to export cotton cloth to England, and also had tea industry in Assam, and they started doing it. But when the British gradually started bringing it, the own finished product to India, the indigenous industry got devastated, and many of the artisan, rural artisan and the industrialists, they got displaced from this traditional economic security, traditional economic work, because British factory product from England was relatively cheaper than the Indian cottage industry product, and that ruined the Indian industry and Indian industrial product. When India got independence in 1947, by that time Indian economy was totally devastated with the British apathetic attitude towards Indian industrialization of India. India was predominantly dependent on agriculture, and agricultural economy was also quite stagnating because of this British land policy that introduced intermediary system in Indian land holding and land cultivation, and many of the landowners got displaced from the land, and gradually many of them became the sharecroppers and artisans. And simultaneously British industrial policy also dislodged and displaced many of the village artisans and craftsmen from the traditional activities. Many of them joined the rural labor force ultimately migrated to the urban areas to the urban labor force. Gandhiji was not in favor of heavy industrialization in India. Gandhiji was looking for a kind of a Swadeshi, and he was in favor of reviving the village industries and his charka, a kind of a self-sufficiency, so that every village become a republic, and within that whatsoever the industrial product the local people produce, that will suffice the local need. That was Gandhian view of the reconstruction and rural reconstruction of India. Nehru's view was different. Nehru was guided by, he was having a, he was always in favor of Fabian socialism. He was looking for a socialistic pattern of country in terms of Fabian thought, that is a democratic socialism where the industrialism will be there, it will be sponsored by the state, and there should be heavy industrialization, and industrialization will take care of majority of Indian problem, so of rural India. So the way it was thought of Indians planning, the planning started coming in from 1952. They started talking about two things. One is that reconstruction of Indian economy in two ways: modernization of Indian agriculture through land reform and agrarian reforms, and also simultaneously heavy industrialization. Starting from second 5-year plan onward, there was enormous emphasis on industrialization in India. However, industrialization in India was a very slow pace. Though some industries developed in some parts of the country, and industrialization has not been a full success in India. In India. So what has happened in the whole process, if you look into, that is, whatsoever industrial development has taken place, it has taken place only in some parts of the country, that is in Maharashtra, some parts of Gujarat, totally, Maharashtra, some parts of Karnataka, some parts of Bengal, but it has not spread in other parts of the major part of the country. It was widely thought of that industrialization will bring in full employment for the people in the country. Also, industrialization will bring more growth in the country, and more growth will bring more kind of development. So it will take care of the whole issues of unemployment, poverty, illiteracy in the country. So even after 70 years of independence, it is looked at, that is our industrial sector accommodates only 23% of the labor force, and it only contributes to the 24% of the GDP. If we look into the annual GDP growth rate, it has always been sluggish. Though starting from 1991, there was a boost in industrial growth in country. At time it has crossed more than 8%, but in recent year, industrial growth has been only to the extent of 4 to 6%. So in brief, we can say that the industrialization has not been able to fulfill the aspiration the way it was thought of in our planning process, also in our planners and administrators, the way they thought of in the early days of Indian independence. But along with industrialization, the way it has taken place, industrial growth had also produced a lot of trade unionism and industrial dispute in the country. So industrialization, the way it should have been promoting the urbanization, that has not taken place. So what we find that our growth in India, it has not been it is as against the Western formulation. In a Western context, most of the industrialization till early part of the 20th century, it was widely promoted by industrialization. But Indian context, industrialization has not been promoted by industrialization. It has been promoted by the process of migration and other kind of economic activities, maybe trading and other specialized economic job. Starting from 1952 till 1991, there was annual government industrial policy. Those policies were widely talking about the big industries, the medium industries and the small industries, and different kind of financial packages were given. Industrial states were prepared for the development and growth of industrialization, and also democratization of the process of industrialization in our country. There was widely talked about the license Raj in industrialization. It was the government-sponsored industrialization. However, 1991 onward, when the government of India accepted economic liberalization package, new industrialization policy has started coming in, and industrialization was supposed to get a new kind of boost. But what has been looked into over a period of time, that though industrialization has not been able to give full employment, rather industrialization has not been able to take care of the problem of unemployment in the country, it has provided a space of aspiration, provided a space for mobility for a larger a segment of workforce in the country, which is much required for the development, for the industrial development in our country. In nutshell, what we are talking about, that the industrialization, the way it should move, and it was supposed to move as per the planning of Indian planner, it has not moved that way. Rather, India has moved from a different direction. What we call, India has moved surpassing the industrial society. It is moving towards a post-industrial society. That is, post-industrial society we talk about in terms of a knowledge-based society. The Knowledge Commission in 2001 widely talked about, reviewed the industrial growth in the country, talked about that India has missed the industrial revolution, but India can't afford to miss the knowledge revolution. So in terms of the need of the labor force, in terms of the need of the country, what it emphasizes, that India should move into to a direction where industrial society to be supplemented by knowledge-based society. That is, knowledge growth is widely emphasized than the industrial society. So far whatsoever I discussed, let us sum up. That is, we talked about, that is, industrialization has started in the Western countries in terms of its enormous emphasis on technological forces, and technology has given the boost for industrialization in those countries, and it has also given boost to the process of urbanization. In the process, there has been enormous change in the social, economic, and political organization in those countries. And sociologists, especially the Western sociologist, has visualized this transition, the industrial transition, in terms of rationalization of the thought, scientific spirit, and also progression of humanity. In Indian context, industrialization has not got that space as it was thought of and planned by the Indian planning process. Rather, Indian developmental process has now got another direction, that is a direction towards a post-industrial society that is leading towards a knowledge-based development, and that may answer many of the problem of unemployment, insecurity, and aspiration of the young generation of this country. Thank you very much for being with us for this lecture. Thank you.